Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 157, Zhongxiang. When Lu Yizi left Xe province the following day, Shen Zequan had Fei Sheng join her entourage with the Jin Yi and instructed him to escort her into the territory of Qidong. Official business that had yet to be finalized yesterday still had to be discussed further, and so everyone settled back into their respective seats in the study with the windows open. This is the new document from last night for the Vice Commander's review, if you may. Zhou Gui presented the papers on the table. We initially separated the registered citizens from the undocumented refugees and increased the severity of punishments, but during the discussion with Yuan Zhou this morning, he proposed we continue keeping both groups together and not govern them separately. Post the notice up, and the issue of household registrations will be easily resolved. Yao Wenyu let out a couple of coughs. It is not advisable if we take the extra move of segregating them, as it will create unhappiness among the commoners who are newly registered, as well as make it difficult for the Yamen to differentiate between the old and new when they carry out their duties. After reading through it, Shen Zequan nodded. It will be a disaster waiting to happen too if anyone tries to fish in troubled waters when the time comes. Since this matter is settled, the only issue left for us to handle before the end of the year is that of the surveillance of fields. The current land records of the fields in Xe province were all measured during the Yanji era. They're too outdated. Xe province has been reclaiming wastelands for 3 years in a row, and in truth, the acreage of land has seen a significant increase. We ought to have resurveyed the land last year, but manpower was lacking then, and Lei Changming was driving us into such a corner. That's why it has been delayed until now. Zhou Gui calculated the time. This task has to be completed before the end of the year, or errors will inevitably arise once the snow thickens. Xe province now had plenty of yamen runners and constables, but capable government clerks and other general function staff were few and far between. The advisors were mostly in charge of deliberating over official matters and were not responsible for the transcription of official documents, let alone sending them down to survey the lands. The Yamen had a manpower shortage, and so did Shen Zequan. After the registration and classification of households, screen them on the spot. As long as they are literate, record them down on file first for future use, regardless of whether they are locals from Xe province or non-natives from Dan City. When Shen Zequan spoke to this point, he looked around the advisors. If someone has committed a crime in the past, we won't be able to find out if he doesn't declare it to us, so we have to be prudent during the screening and vetting process. Some may well see it as a business too, and it's inevitable that there will be people who attempt to curry favor with those in authority for personal gain. However, I trust that the various gentlemen here are all men of integrity who can distinguish between the crafty and the virtuous and do the right thing when it comes down to it. Given how frankly he had said it, who would still not understand? The seated advisors who were initially smoking their pipes all rose to their feet noisily. A few of them looked embarrassed, no longer daring to jest around again. ******. The advisors were all Zhou Gui's honored guests with free access to the governmental office. Most of them were addressed as Mr., with their daily needs provided by Zhou Gui. There were only 2 ways that they could earn some spare cash. The first was to provide literary services, and the second was to attend the banquets of the local squires and elders, where they would be able to obtain monetary rewards from the household's masters. But now that they were in charge of recording the registrations and screening the general function staff, there was no doubt some among the current flood of refugees into Xe province who would be thinking of pulling some strings and sneaking them bribes on the sly. Gao Zhongxiang was one of the unlucky ones. After Han Jin was taken as prisoner, Gao Zhongxiang did not dare to return to Chu capital for fear that Han Cheng would pursue the matter, so he relied on his connection to his maternal uncle in Dan City and remained in Dan City as Pan Yi's advisor. At first, Pan Yi had the intent to entrust him with heavy responsibility, but many of the plans and strategies he put forth were impractical theories that only looked good on paper, and so Pan Yi gradually gave him the cold shoulder. Bullied and humiliated by the servants in the Pan's residence, he had no choice but to return to his uncle's house. But when it rains, it pours, and his uncle fell to his death one night while in a drunken stupor. Gao Zhongxiang was a scholar who was too physically weak to carry out practical work, and his auntie, disdaining him for being useless, found an excuse to send him back to Yu province. Gao Zhongxiang felt ashamed to return home to face his elders and fellow townsfolk, so he thought of selling calligraphy and paintings to rent a few acres of low-yield land and do an imitation of a carefree immortal leading a simple and virtuous life free from the struggle for power and wealth. But who would have known? He had not even worked in the field a couple of times after saving enough money to buy it when the field was forcibly seized by the local despot from the Fei clan. Gao Zhongxiang went to the Yamen to lodge a complaint, and on that very same night, he was stopped by some men in the alley and beaten up. Even his house was robbed. Without a penny to his name, he was driven to the streets and reduced to beggary. He wanted to return to Yu province but he had no traveling expenses. Left without an alternative, he fled Dan city with the other refugees and came to Tse province, hoping to try his luck. Old man Su, Gao Zhongxiang stood reservedly outside the door and hurriedly called out when he saw the man coming out. Any news about the matter from the Yamen? To think that he used to be an outstanding figure back in Chu capital but now, he had to humble himself when speaking to others. He wanted to ingratiate himself with the other man but he was unwilling to overdo it due to his pride. However, standing fixed in place made him look rather out of place. The Yamen runner with the surname Su brandished his Yamen paddle and shooed Gao Zhongxiang to a side. It was only when he turned back and could no longer see the interior of the Yamen that he reproached Gao Zhongxiang in a hushed tone, "What are you doing here?" Gao Zhongxiang felt so humiliated from the admonishment that he could not lift his head. He clenched his sleeves and forced a smile when he managed to raise his head again. "I passed by the wine store ahead earlier, and I brought some over for you to quench your thirst. Here, have some." He presented the wine with both hands, continuing only when he saw the other man's expression soften some. "I've been in Tse province for a few days. About that matter I spoke to you about the last time." "That matter? That matter?" Yamen runner Su drank the wine and denied it after wiping his mouth. "What matter?" "About getting a job in the Yamen." Gao Zhongxiang did not lift his hand to wipe away the spittle on his face. "Please do me a favor and pass a message to the various advisors. Just say that I was formerly a student from Chu capital who has received the Chief Surveillance Bureau, Sen." "Oh, that matter. That can be easily arranged." Yamen runner Su moved in closer. "Prepare 3 taels of silvers, and I'll buy a few packs of tobacco for the various gentlemen. You'll be able to get past this hurdle then." Gao Zhongxiang was stunned for a moment, his expression a mixture of joy and sorrow. "I've already given it all to you. I have no more money." Yamen runner Su instantly turned hostile. The old man said, "How can you do anything without money? You think the gentlemen live on vegetables? They'll only acknowledge cold hard cash. If I hadn't taken pity on you and was willing to help you out, how could these silvers have been enough? No way it would have been enough." Gao Zhongxiang hastily tugged on Yamen runner Su's arm. "I've already given you a total of 7 taels of silver in all. You must have some news. You want to get in through the use of connections but you can't bear to part with your money." Yamen runner Su threw the wine gourd into Gao Zhongxiang's arms and stretched his neck out to spat at him, his words contemptuous, "You know, even when you pee or shit, you still have to undo your belt." All of Gao Zhongxiang's money had been cheated out of him by Yamen runner Su, and since he had been hanging out with the group of refugees all day, he was as filthy as a beggar. As he looked at Yamen runner Su's face at that moment, he recalled the humiliation he experienced in Dan city. In a fit of anger, he charged towards Yamen runner Su without a care, threw him one tight slap, and yelled, "Since you didn't do what I asked, give me back my money." Yamen runner Su could not have imagined that Gao Zhongxiang would dare to hit him. He pointed at the tip of Gao Zongxiang's nose. You. A despicable cheapskate like you dares to hit me. As they exchanged blows, Yamen runner Su swung his yamen paddle at Gao Zongxiang's waist, kicked him over to the ground, and whacked away at him viciously. Gao Zhongxiang, a mere scholar who had been starving for days, felt a stab of intense pain on his waist as one of the blows landed on a port-rooting bone in his body. He rolled on the floor, covering his head as he attempted to dodge the blows. He was crying so hard he was running out of breath. Even so, he still shouted, "Are you human? You cheated me out of my money. Are you still human?" With more people crowding over, Yamen runner Su did not dare stir up a big commotion, lest the yamen came to investigate. He tossed aside his yamen paddle and straddled on top of Gao Zhongxiang, then gripped his face by the jaw and shoved a towel used for wiping sweat into his mouth to gag him. Gao Zhongxiang was howling as he struggled, so Yamen runner Su slapped him ruthlessly multiple times until Gao Zongxiang's ears were ringing and his vision blurred, even the corners of his mouth were bleeding. "I'm on official business here." Yamen runner Su shouted to the crowd around him, "This son of a bitch is a thief from Dan City. I caught him the last time. To think he still dares come and seek revenge today." A sound escaped from Gao Zongxiang's throat as Yamen runner Su dragged him by the collar towards the Yamen's entrance. The side of his cheek scraped against the ground, bloodied by the gravel. He reached his hand out towards those before him in a plea for help. Yamen runner Su kicked Gao Zhongxiang a few more times on the chest and abdomen. As Yamen runners, they were the most adept at running around detaining and summoning people for questioning. Teaching a frail scholar like Gao Zhongxiang a lesson was simply a piece of cake. As long as he dragged Gao Zhongxiang in today and kept the latter gagged while he processed the latter with a thievery charge, he could throw him in prison. By then, all he had to do was to give the wardens he was on familiar terms with a heads up, and Gao Zhongxiang would have it coming for him. Whether or not he could survive past the 8th month would all depend on Yamen runner Su's mood. At the same time the commotion was ongoing, Zhou Gui was returning with Shenzhequan from the fields on the outskirts of the city. The horse carriage had been obstructed midway along the path, and he thought it was yet another instance of the refugees causing trouble. Shenzhequan did not say a word. Zhou Gui hurriedly stepped off his own carriage and hoisted up the hem of his robe as he pushed through the crowd and asked, "What's going on? Who is kicking up a ruckus by the entrance of the yamen?" Yamen runner Su immediately replied, "Answering your excellency, I've caught a thief. He not only refuses to submit, but even hits others." For the past few days, Zhou Gui had been perturbed over the lack of public order in the city. He furrowed his brow at hearing this. Even so, that's no way to handle the situation. What do you mean by beating up others in the streets? That's not right. He took a glance at Gao Zhongxiang. He initially intended to chastise him and educate him on the proprieties and morals. However, he remembered that Shenzhequan's horse carriage was still obstructed at the back. They could not afford a delay, so he said, "Hurry and bring him in. Give him a proper trial once he has been cleaned up." Upon hearing this, Gao Zhongxiang started struggling with all his might and attempted to spit out the towel in his mouth. Yao Wenyu was currently discussing the reviews of the clerks and other general function staff over these few days with Shenzhequan. The carriage had remained stuck for a long time with no signs of movement. Qiao Tianya returned and lifted a corner of the curtain to report to Shenzhequan. "Master, they're still making a ruckus. Let's take a detour." Shenzhequan pushed the curtains higher with his folding fan and asked, "What's the matter?" "They're saying it's a thief. The yamen runner arrested him on the streets." Qiao Tianya shifted his body slightly to give way. "I didn't see any calluses on his hands, he seems to be a scholar." Yao Wenyu, who rarely enjoyed being in noisy places now, looked over together with them. The area ahead was swarming with a crowd of people, he could see nothing at all. "Let's take a detour." Shenzhequan released the drapes and let it fall. "Head straight to the Zhou's residence." There are still people waiting in the study. We have to discuss the matter of the mutual market before the hour of you. Qiao Tianya ordered the carriage driver to turn the horses around. As they were turning, they suddenly heard a heartbreaking wail from ahead. You people are forcing me to my death. What kind of yamen is this? Oh heavens, do you have to reduce this Gao Zhongxiang to such straits? Yao Wenyu abruptly lifted the drapes and said to Qiao Tianya, hold on, that person is Gao Zhongxiang, whose essay Sen you have given pointers to before. He then looked towards Shen Zequin. He's the student who led 3,000 students from the Imperial Academy to denounce Pan Rugui that rainy night. Vice Commander, this person is of use to us. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 158, Broken Jade. General function staff like clerks should not be confused with governmental officials. They were at the bottom of the hierarchy with no rank and were technically not considered officials. But they could write and count, and they were far more proficient in local law than the local officials themselves, so they could dispose of all incriminating evidence and leave no traces for anyone to use against them whenever they oppressed, tricked, and even extorted the local commoners. Furthermore, mutual cover-ups were prevalent, given the geographical limitations in place. When Luo Mu first arrived at Cha province, there were plenty of matters he did not manage to work on, and one of the reasons was that he was impeded by the general function staff of Cha province. The local administration not only affected the officials' political track record, sometimes, they could also become obstacles to the implementation of local policies. The imperial court had assigned a provincial surveillance commissioner to Zongbo after the defeat of its troops, but Dun province had already lost the ability to control and hold the other 5 prefectures in check. Consequently, the corruption of local administrations in Zongbo degenerated over the years to the point that it became totally grim. Gao Zhongxiang had already been taken to a physician, and Zhou Gui was pacing the study. The advisors all sat in the partitioned area and waited silently with rapt attention for Shen Zequin to speak. This matter concerned the screening of the general function staff, and it was also a question as to whether the yamen would be replacing its current yamen runners. Zhou Gui spoke in a grave tone. We were just discussing this matter yesterday, and things have already gone awry today. That old man Su is a yamen runner, and he has already obtained bribes over a dozen silver taels just for the screening of the general function staff alone. There are so many staff and subordinates from top to bottom in the yamen. If others are also conducting illicit deals on this, then how many of the general function staff we employ as a result of this screening process will be truly of use? Yao Wenyu drank the tea and said nothing as he put the lid back on. Anyone who was discerning could tell at a glance that this affair undoubtedly implicated Zhou Gui's advisors. Old man Su was just a yamen runner, yet he dared to take advantage of the opportunity presented to make quick money. It would have been impossible for him to do this at all unless there was someone supporting him in secret. Yao Wenyu was Shen Zequin's advisor. If he were to speak up and ask for them to deal with the matter severely, he would be suspected of trying to supplant Zhou Gui's advisors. In all the recent discussions, he had remained secure in his position by Shen Zequin's side as his counsel, but he was a newcomer, and he could not compare with them in terms of seniority. The reputation of unpolished Jade Yuan Zhou had reached far and wide. Others treated him as an immortal when he had been beyond their reach, but now that he had fallen, they treated him as a live target. Criticism among peers was a minor affair, but if this led to friction between Shen Zequin and Zhou Gui, it would be to the detriment of Tse province. As the saying goes, every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt, its debtor. Shen Zequin weighed his folding fan in his chair, his expression unreadable as he sat on the chair. Whoever did it, just deal with said person in accordance with the standard procedure. The screening process is no small matter, and there is plenty at stake. We cannot end up hurting the various diligent and hard-working gentlemen because of paranoia. The advisors in the partitioned area did not dare make a sound, although a few inwardly let out sighs of relief. Shenzhen was in Tse province and he still had to count on Zhou Gui's power and influence. It was only to be expected for him to handle this matter with care. It was still salvageable if the administration was corrupt, but the timing was obviously not good. If they handled this too harshly and ended up implicating over half of Tse province's yamen upon following the trail, then how were they going to get any work done when all the general function staff and subordinates positions have been vacated? Conversely, Zhou Gui was reluctant now. Vice Commander, it is precisely because it's no small matter that it has to be investigated. We cannot let people ruin the integrity of the yamen. If others were to imitate this behavior in the future, then it's still the commoners who will suffer. Of course, it has to be investigated. What I meant is for us to go by the book. Shenzhen called for someone to steep the tea, then continued, Old Man Su has already been taken into custody. If Your Excellency doesn't feel reassured, then by all means, send someone you can trust to sit in and transcribe it down. With the Jin Jiu conducting the trial, there will be results by tonight. Baseless accusations cannot be trusted, but conclusive evidence cannot be disregarded either. Whoever wants to violate the regulations of the yamen then will have to bear the responsibility for their actions. Wasn't the newly transcribed penal laws just posted? This incident came at the right time. Your Excellency can set up court and hold the trial in front of the citizens of Tse province. The more turbid the waters, the more they have to be sifted to clear it. But once the case concludes, we must never take inaccurate rumors for truth and jump to conclusions. The yamen does not do anything that will implicate the innocent. Zhou Gui said, this matter must be taken as a warning. Shenzhen replied, but of course, those who are lightly punished shall be dismissed from their position, and those who are severely punished shall be exiled to barren lands. If public sentiment runs high, an on-the-spot execution in the court can also serve to bring immense satisfaction to all. A crash rang out from the partitioned area, and the stunned gasps of the advisors suddenly rose. Zhou Gui hurriedly asked, what's the matter? A few people responded, Your Excellency, someone fainted. They initially assumed that Shenzhen meant to punish only Old Man Su and show mercy to the rest of them, but who would have thought that Shenzhen wanted to make an example out of them? The Jin Jiu were the ones presiding over the interrogation, so how could an old man from the countryside like Old Man Su withstand it? Not implicating the innocent meant not pursuing the matter for the others, but not a single one of the parties involved in Old Man Su's case this time was going to get away with it. The more those sitting in the partitioned area listened, the more seized with terror they became, so much that when Shenzhen uttered the for on-the-spot execution, one of them promptly passed out cold. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. It was a state of pandemonium in the study. On the other side, Gao Zhongxiang was grimacing in pain under the hands of the physician. After the physician left, he changed into a clean set of clothes with the help of the maidservants. He was one to keep himself in good health back in Chu capital, so even if he was starving right now, he dared not gobble down his meal. After he was done eating, the maidservants led Gao Zhongxiang to the courtyard. On the way there, he did not dare to look around. He knew Shenzhen was now residing in Tse province, and he felt rather apprehensive. For someone who had given Hanjin counsel on the pursuit and capture of Xiao Qiye, coming to Tse province could be said to be a risky, desperate move. Gao Zhongxiang entered the courtyard and saw that the jasmine orange beyond the wooden railing of the covered walkway had all withered. No one had swept away the blanket of white petals on the ground. Presumably, it was on the specific instruction of the master of the house to allow its natural fragrance to remain lingering in the air. Meanwhile, the green moss and gravel stone left along the edge of the pond bridge made it appear as though it was paved with a new, visually pleasing mattress. Gao Zhongxiang ascended the stairs as he peeked at it, and in a moment of inattention, he nearly slipped. After he awkwardly braced himself up, he hurriedly bowed to the maidservants in front who were snickering behind covered mouths, sweating profusely as he repeated the bows. Wind chimes dangled beneath the eaves. Ding Tao waited for Gao Zhongxiang to come over before he lifted the curtains for him and led him inside. Gao Zhongxiang did not know Ding Tao's identity and so did not dare to offend him. Instead, he lifted the hem of his own robe, intending to stride in, only to realize that there was no threshold in this room. The interior of the hall was bright and spacious, with no valuable ornaments. When Gao Zhongxiang was in Chu capital, he often heard that Shen Zequan kept company with Shi Hongxian and the rest who was fond of extravagance. He was known for carrying small ivory fans on him all the time. Thus, he guessed that the owner of this residence was perhaps Zhou Gui. Gao Zhongxiang sat upright, all prim and proper, his butt barely touching the edge of the chair as he focused and paid close attention to the signs of movement in the courtyard. A short moment later, he suddenly heard the sound of wheels from the courtyard. Ding Tao, who had been under the eaves, stepped out to greet, "Young master." The curtain was lifted up, and Gao Zhongxiang promptly rose to his feet. However, the first one to enter was not Shen Zequan or Zhou Gui, but a tall, unconventional bodyguard. This bodyguard did not look at Gao Zhongxiang. Instead, he leaned over to take over the wheelchair and pushed in a young master dressed in green with an overcoat draped over him. Gao Zhongxiang was about to go by the propriety and kneel, but then, when he got a clear look at who was in the wheelchair, he could not help but gape with wide-opened eyes. Then he took a step back and exclaimed in shock, "Yao! Yuanzhou!" This exclamation put a frown onto the face of Shen Zequan, who entered after the two. He removed his overcoat and made a beeline for the seat of honor. Qiao Tianya pushed Yao Wenyu to the front, and the maidservants came forth to serve the tea. Yao Wenyu held the teacup in his hands and said with a neutral expression, "It has been a long time. I didn't expect Xinwei to come to Tse province, too." For some reason, Gao Zhongxiang broke out in a cold sweat. He dabbed at his sweat and uttered a sound of acknowledgement. Not daring to continue looking Yao Wenyu in the eyes, he hastily paid his respects to Shen Zequan. Your Excellency." Shen Zequan found this man's expression odd. After he took his seat, he said, "There's no need to be so formal. Take a seat." How would Gao Zhongxiang dare to? Since Xinwei knows who the vice commander is, then there is no need for me to waste my breath. Yao Wenyu initially wanted to introduce Gao Zhongxiang to Shen Zequan, but on seeing how deathly pale Gao Zhongxiang was, he paused and changed his tone to soothe him. "Xinwei, don't be afraid. I'm a living man." Gao Zhongxiang still did not dare to look up and merely repeated, "Yes." Shen Zequan asked, "Yuanzhou, what makes you say that?" Yao Wenyu was succinct in his answer, "I had a chance encounter with Xinwei in Dan City once. The poison and my injuries acted up simultaneously at that time and gave him a scare." But Gao Zhongxiang looked nervous. It was clearly not as simple as a chance encounter. After Yao Wenyu had his legs broken and left the capital, he went to Dan City, where he received the care of Pan Yi and the commandery Princess Zheyu. He was apparently poisoned in Dan City, although he had never told anyone the story behind it. Gao Zhongxiang, however, knew about it. "I left Dan City in such a hurry. Are the commandant and commandery princess well?" Yao Wenyu asked. At Yao Wenyu's tone, Gao Zhongxiang gradually relaxed enough for him to answer smoothly, but he was still turned to the side and did not dare to look at Yao Wenyu. "Yes, they are both fine." Shen Zequan could sense something from this exchange. The maidservants had all retreated, while Ding Tao was striking the wind chimes for fun under the eaves. They clinked and clanked noisily, as if a gale was wreaking havoc. Qiao Tianya lifted the curtain to chase Ding Tao away, and it finally quietened down on the other side of the beaded curtain. Yao Wenyu seemed neither happy nor unhappy to hear this piece of news. He set aside his teacup and broke the silence to say to Shen Zequan, "When I arrived in Dan City, the commandery princess was looking after me, but she is, after all, a married woman, and there were many areas that was inconvenient for her to intervene with." The commandant thus sought out Pan Yuan, who was still living at home at that time. This Pan Yuan is the commandant's younger illegitimate brother. Pan Yuan was an idler who loafed around all day. He was fond of gambling, but he was not a direct descendant of legitimate birth from the Pan clan, so he could only rely on Pan Yi and his wife to repay the huge debt he owed them. Pan Yi had him take care of Yao Wenyu, hoping that he could be inspired to emulate the virtuous and improve himself. Furthermore, Pan Yuan had been very dedicated to taking care of their father in the past and could be considered a filial son. At first, Pan Yuan could be said to be attentive. With Commandery Princess Zayu's exhortations, he did not dare to be careless in his treatment of Yao Wenyu. He did not have to do anything personally, either. All he had to do was watch the physicians and attendants to ensure that they were timely with the meals and medicine and that they were not being careless on the job. But after some time, Pan Yuan got tired and fed up with it and started to find excuses to venture outdoors to gamble. Pan Lin used the prisoner's body as a decoy, but this move did not dispel Xue Xiaozu's suspicions. The commandery princess left in a hurry back then, and it was inevitable for there to be spies in her entourage. Yao Wenyu continued. The gambling den later came hounding Pan Yuan for payment, and Pan Yuan went into hiding all over. He did not dare to tell his family, so he often poured out his woes to me. But I was penniless, and I was in no position to help even if I wanted to. Gao Zhongxiang nodded and said, Pan Yuan sought me out at that time to borrow money, too. He said he had been forced into a corner. Despite selling off the fields belonging to his branch of the family, he still could not pay off his debt. I advised him to tell the commandant as soon as possible before it was too late, but he simply refused to. Yao Wenyu did not speak again when Gao Zhongxiang spoke to this point. Gao Zhongxiang continued, in less than half a month, Pan Yuan suddenly came to me for a drink. He said his gambling debt had been fully paid off, as he had met a benefactor who had extended him help. I was worried he had been deceived by the gambling den, so I sounded him out during the feast about this benefactor. He only said this person was a Lanzhou merchant from Chu capital who had asked him to run an errand for him. Another half a month passed. Yao Wenyu's injuries not only did not heal but had instead even deteriorated further. Commandery Princess Zayu asked all the physicians at home, but Yao Wenyu's condition showed no improvement. At that time, Pan Lin suffered a setback in Chu capital, and even Pan Yi was impeached along with him. The issue at hand turned out to be about the Pan clan's fields in Dan City. Pan Xiangji did not dare to speak up for his sons, fearful that the matter would develop into disproportionate proportions. But even the Pan clan's repeated concessions did not manage to stop the storm from blowing their way, and the imperial censors got so heated that they vehemently demanded Pan Lin to be suspended pending trial. There was indeed an issue with the Pan clan, but that was a debt born out of Pan Xiangji's greed. The reason Pan Lin bore the brunt of it was rather obvious. It was because he harbored Yao Wenyu. But he acted in a fit of pique at this injustice, adamant on fighting Xue Xiaozuo till the end. It did not take long for Pan Xiangji to learn of the inside story. Fearing that the Pan clan would be implicated, he wrote a letter overnight to Pan Yi, who was in Dan City, and demanded for him to send Yao Wenyu back to Chu capital as soon as possible. Pan Yi refused, and so Pan Xiangji became so enraged that he subsequently became bedridden in illness, putting Pan Yi in a dilemma. At the same time, the commandery Princess Zayu noticed the oddness of Yao Wenyu's condition and grew suspicious, so she bypassed the front hall and got her personal maid to call over a physician from outside the residence to take a look. Yao Wenyu had no wish to get into the details. After a moment of silence, he merely said, the commandery princess was worried that Chu capital would use the matter of inspecting the fields as a pretext to come over and capture me. She initially wanted to send me to the manor that came as part of her dowry to recuperate, but there were problems with the medicine, and she could no longer trust the people in the Pan's residence. So, she prepared traveling expenses and entrusted someone with the task of sending me secretly to Jin City, where my late teacher's longtime friends still reside. But misfortune didn't come only once. The people in his entourage saw that Yao Wenyu was not only seriously ill but also had both his legs broken, so after they left the city, they forgot all that the commandery Princess Zheyu had entrusted to them with and ran away with the traveling expenses and horse carriage under the cover of the night. That night, Yao Wenyu was thrown into the wilderness. All that remained other than the donkey was his cat. He used to sleep in the wild with Mother Earth as his pillow when he was wandering the mountains and plains, but the experience of it this time was completely poles apart. For the first time in his 24 years of life, he realized that he was nothing. He was a nobody once his reputation was stripped off from him. Unpolished jade Yuan Zhou. It was at that moment Yao Wenyu loathed these words to the core. They were like humiliation branded deep into his bone marrow. In the wilderness, Yao Wenyu broke down and cried inconsolably. For his teacher, and for himself. He refused to see anyone when he was in Dan City, merely lying all day long on that bed shrouded in dimness. His legs were hurting but his self-esteem was the one that had shattered. He had to face up to the fact that he was no longer able to take care of himself. All that carefree spirit of his had turned into a thing of the past. Such were his dreams for each sleep he took, and it remained the same when he woke up. He was broken through and through. However, he still wanted to live. End chapter. Note, Lanzhou merchants, from the Lanzhou group who were famous merchants during the Ming and Qing dynasties for its operations in jewelry, book publishing, and paper-making industries. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 159, Nameless. There was something amiss with Yao Wenyu's medicine. The physicians from the Pan's residence could not figure out what was wrong, but this no doubt had something to do with Pan Yuan, considering that he had been the one taking care of Yao Wenyu. The commandery Princess Zheyu later checked on the Lanzhou merchant who had paid off Pan Yuan's debt, but the other party had long disappeared without a trace. Not long after Yao Wenyu left, Pan Yuan fell off his horse and died, and thus, the trail leading to the identity of the person who instigated him to poison Yao Wenyu hit a dead end. However, Pan Lin had the blame pinned on Xue Zaiozhuo, and both parties' relationship in Chu capital continued to deteriorate. Gao Zhongxiang sensed the atmosphere in the room growing tense. When he remembered he was also on friendly terms with Pan Yuan, he felt as though he was sitting on pins and needles, worried that Yao Wenyu would blame him for it by association. The silence was too much for him to bear, and he could not help breaking it. Although I am acquainted with Pan Yuan, we do not share the same ideals. All the typical exchange of formalities over wine we had are merely a matter of necessity. He was not adept at flattery and stumbled over his words. On the contrary, I am in admiration of Yuan Zhuo's talent. We once had an encounter over a poetry meet during the Xian era, and Yuan Zhuo's talent and bearing were so out of this world that it was truly an ethereal sight to behold. Yao Wenyu waited for Gao Zhongxiang to finish before he calmly said, "The past is but a dream, it's all now water under the bridge. It's fate that we can meet again in Tse province alive. Now that I've found a good master, may I ask what plans you have for the future?" Gao Zhongxiang stole a glance at Shen Zequin. What plans could I even have now that I've been reduced to such a state? He revealed a bitter smile as he spoke. I've made a laughing stock of myself with my behavior today. I've persevered in my studies for so many years, but in the end, it has all come to nothing. Shen Zequin clasped his folding fan under his sleeves. The room felt chilly to him. It was time to get someone to prepare the hand warmer. He pulled his wandering mind back in an instant, his jade earring turning to the side slightly as he spoke politely to Gao Zhongxiang. The political climate is currently unstable, and the various heroes are fighting over themselves to make a play for the top. Since Mr. Xinwei has come to Tse province, why don't you reside temporarily in my residence and take your time to decide? Gao Zhongxiang could not help feeling greatly touched when he heard Shen Zequin calling him Mr. Xinwei. He had been through a lot of hardships on this life journey of his, and the masters he had successively encountered and served had not been good masters. And so he stood up and bowed deeply to Shen Zequin, his words even more awkward and inarticulate. Shenzequan comforted him a little, and it was an hour later before Gao Zhongxiang withdrew. Yao Wenyu looked at the bamboo blinds falling back into place. He waited until Gao Zhongxiang had walked out of the walkway before he asked, "Does the vice commander find this man to be of no use?" Even if Shenzequan truly thought so, he could not say it outright. Thus, he answered, "He must have his talent for you to recommend him to this extent." "That's right," Yao Wenyu said. "Gao Zongxiang's courtesy name is Shenwei, and he has always been known as the eloquent brush when he was in the Imperial Academy. Back then, when Shi Hongxian was setting the storm in motion in Chu capital by inciting the Imperial Academy, he chose Gao Zhongxiang precisely because of the latter's talent in writing. Gao Zhongxiang was a student who entered the capital in the 4th year of Xian era, which coincided with the defeat of Zongbo's troops. It was a scene of devastation everywhere in the 6 prefectures then, and the lamentation of Hashi that he wrote under the influence of wine caused the students to fall over themselves to transcribe private copies for distribution. When it made its way into Senyu's hands, it even made Senyu shed tears by the candlelight, deeply moved as he was. Shenzequan drank the tea and said, "So, that's how it is." The Imperial Academy's disturbance that Shi Hongxian had facilitated was in fact, instigated by Shenzequan. Gao Zhongxiang led the students to demand answers for Shenzequan's release from the Temple of Penitence and ended up being forcibly quelled by Pan Rugui and Jilei. This led to a turnabout of the then students' direction, turning the entire farce into a dispute between them and the Pan faction. Jilei and the others were caught off guard before they could act, and subsequently, they lost the initiative to land a decisive blow on Shenzequan to take him down. Shenzequan himself knew best what had played a key role in that fiasco, including the Imperial Academy uproar that Shuiziaozuo had later stirred up again. They had both gotten a firm grasp on the inclination of the public sentiments before herding them into moving in the direction they wanted. To do this, compelling rhetoric and articles that had the power to move men were the most indispensable. Yao Wenyu's meaning was clear: Gao Zongxiang's writings had such power. He could stir up a storm, and it was precisely such literary prowess that Shenzequan was in need of right now. The trip to Cha province has made the vice commander a well-known figure, but because of the taint that is Shenwei, it's still far from enough if you want to lead and command the various heroes in an open and above-board manner. Yao Wenyu paused for a moment. Even if the full story of the defeat from start to end is made public in the future, it would still be hard for Shenwei to be absolved of blame. An ill reputation lends no weight to one's words. This was a problem that Shenzequan could not circumvent. King Yi of Fan province was currently drafting up documents to attack and vilify Tse province, and he had made reference to the defeat of Shenwei multiple times. Shenwei's withdrawal from battle without so much as a fight was a fact, and there was no way to refute that even if Zhou Gui wanted to. Firstly, Shenzequan was indeed Shenwei's 8th son of illegitimate birth. He was Shenwei's son by blood, and the so-called unfavor treatment that he had received held no water in quelling the anger of the public. That was a blood relation, one unlike Fei Sheng with a remote illegitimate birth connection, where a glib tongue was all that was needed to convince the people. Secondly, the defeat of the troops was a tragedy caused by Hua Saiqian and the others' attempts to fill up the void in the state treasury, but the evidence of that had all been destroyed. Shenwei committed suicide by self-immolation, Hua Saiqian died in prison, and Wei Huigu succumbed to poison. Not a single trace was left of their collusion with the Bianchi cavalry to sell out Great Zhou's military defense maps. This was the dark cloud that was constantly hanging over Shenzequan's head. It was also his greatest pitfall. He had risen to power in Tse province, but why was he faced with such a scarcity of talents? Because the talents of the world refused to come to him. They would rather follow heroes like King Yi, who had risen in rebellion among the common people, than throw in their lots with Shenzequan. The vice commander executed an advisor of Tse province today, and it's only by holding the trial publicly that the vice commander's name did not fall into further disrepute. But with the rise of Tse province and the allegiance of Cha province, the vice commander must first drop the title of vice commander if the vice commander wishes to advance a step further. Noting Shen Zequin's neutral expression as he fiddled with his folding fan, Yao Wenyu knew then that Shen Zequin had already considered this, so he continued, Chse province has long freed itself from Chu capital's control. Using the former title makes it all too easy to confound the status of master and subordinates. It's no longer apt to keep the title vice commander. By the time Yao Wenyu had spoken to this point, both men had reached a tacit understanding. Shen Zequin could be addressed as vice commander, or even judge, but those were his titles in the Jinyi way, although they were rendered void when he left Chu capital. He was now in Chse province, and Chse province's prefectural prefect was Jiugui. If he had no new form of address, it would imply that he was still the guest and Jiugui was the host and the master. The offending advisors could still remain securely seated in place in the partitioned area despite what had happened at the Yamen because they still treated Jiugui as the master of Chse province. They did not see themselves as subordinate to Shen Zequin. There was still a line between both parties. Only Kong Ling had long since recognized the problem. He brought this to Jiugui's attention before he set off for Cha province the last time, and he had reminded Jiugui again when he set off for Huai province this time. But Jiugui was truly not adept when it came to this sort of matter, and that was why he had been slow to react. Shen Zequin could not proclaim himself king, at least, not now. King Yi of Fan province established himself so early that he was literally the prey standing right in front of Qidong. Qizuyan already had the time to catch a breather and get back in the game. Once she filled in the gap at Bianjun Commandery, she would have spare resources to deploy troops to Zongbo, and the first one she was going to fight would be these random kings that had risen from among the common people. There are benefits to being nameless nobodies. Shen Zequin leaned back slightly. At least if Qizuyan dispatches troops without any justifiable cause, she would not be able to bypass the other 5 prefectures to come after Chse province. Chse province did not have bandits or self-proclaimed kings. Xiao Qi, who commanded the imperial army, was the one the 8 great training divisions were pursuing. Shen Zequin was at most a fugitive, and Chse province was at most harboring a fugitive. Jiugui had not openly and blatantly hung up the rebel flag, and he was still the prefect in the territory. His turning of a deaf ear to Chu capital's orders could be put down to the long distance between Chse province and Chu capital, and just based on this alone, Qizuyan could not attack Chse province not unless she used the suppression of bandits as a pretext to route her troops to the western side of Chse province, then enter Chse province with the excuse that she was just transiting through. However, the deployment of troops like this meant that the military expenditure required would increase exponentially, and Chu capital might not necessarily be able to spare the funds for it. The best option was still for the 8 great training divisions to deploy their troops. They had support for provisions from Dan City and were located close enough, and they could also use the reason of tracking down Shen Zequin to take him in for questioning to launch a war with Chse province. However, Han Jin was too impatient. Not only were his troops broken up by Xiao Qi, he was also beaten silly by Xiao Qi. This consequently led the 8 great training divisions into cowering back. But such a situation could not last for long. Because the 8 great training divisions were bound to stage a comeback. Once the 3 parties in Chu capital entered a period of stability, the Ministry of War would re-elect a new chief commander. It was to guard against the situation that Xiao Qi and Shen Zequin had taken the Biwen hunting grounds from Jiugui for use as the imperial army's camp. This way, a 20,000-strong imperial army would be the shield at the west of Chse province, used for the specific purpose of resisting the 8 great training divisions. But at the same time, the imperial army only had to return to Chse province's territory, and Qizuyan would be able to head north and launch a direct assault on Chse province on the grounds of eliminating the rebel forces. Therefore, Shen Zequin was in no hurry to get rid of King Yi of Fan province. He wanted King Yi to be the mountain that stood between him and Qidong. However, he could not allow King Yi to expand unchecked either. I once made a proposal for the vice commander to take down Fan province swiftly, but it's no longer a good time now. The tea in Yao Wenyu's palm had cooled. He continued, if the vice commander wants to keep King Yi going, then you have to first hack off the hand he is reaching out to the north with. A few months ago, Shen Zequan's eyes were clear. Lei Jingzhi was sent back to Mount Luo by Xian, where he became the target of public censure and could no longer command the bandits, resulting in chaos on Mount Luo as the various internal factions turned against one another. Now that King Yi wants to form an alliance with Mount Luo, Lei Jingzhi, who wholeheartedly wants to stage a comeback, will not miss this opportunity. Something stirred in Yao Wenyu's eyes. He said, Vice Commander means to. Shen Zequan suddenly opened his folding fan and partially covered his face. With a smile in his eyes, he slowly said, I'm going to give him a helping hand. The wind had picked up outside the window, it looked like it was about to rain again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Han Jing gouged away at the walls until his 10 fingers were scraped bare. He had been in the Tse province prison for close to 3 months, and he had gotten so emaciated he was barely recognizable. What's more, he still had to put up with verbal abuse and insults from the others. At first, he could not stand it, and he would even cry himself a river, but as time passed, he gradually grew numb. Mealtime. Carrying a tub in hand, the warden knocked on the cell doors one at a time with a wooden spoon and hollered, It's mealtime. They were adept at this and could swiftly dish out the broth and rice, filling the bowl to the brim without missing a drop. On hearing his voice, Han Jin hurried over to the cell door and reached out for the bowl. Unexpectedly, the warden passing by behind kicked the bowl over, sending the mixture of rice and broth spilling all over the ground. Han Jin was so hungry he was having stomach pains. He kneeled and pinched up the rice on the ground with his fingers and desperately shoved them into his mouth. There were grains of sand and gravel among the rice, which made his teeth ache as he chomped down on them. He pressed his head against the cell door and reached into his mouth with his dirty hand to dig out the stones. As he was doing so, he suddenly saw a pair of legs stopping at the other end of the prison door. Han Jin carefully lifted his eyes and looked out evasively. Gao Zhongxiang, who had initially meant to come and take a look at his former master, never expected Han Jin to be reduced to such a state. Han Jin was Han Cheng's younger brother, and he could be said to have been a free-spirited young master in Chu capital. He succeeded Shi Guan as the viceroy of the 8 great training divisions, and he had also been there in person during the public ditches case and gone into the waters. At that time, he had great respect for Xiao Qi Ye. Gao Zhongxiang felt a lump in his throat. There were several times he wanted to open his mouth and speak but words failed him. Han Jin looked blankly at Gao Zhongxiang, then abruptly pounced over to grab the bars and ask in a tearful voice, Is my elder brother here? Tell me, has my elder brother come? End chapter.